What's up, y'all? This is week 2 of goals, where we're talking about, you guessed it, setting and achieving goals, but not just any goals, God-sized goals. In the book, The Little Prince, there's a quote that I really like. It says, "A goal without a plan is just a wish." And I really like this quote because it reveals that all goals need a plan. Whether it's trying to get your homework done by 7 p.m., learning a new skill, or changing the entire world, God gives us all the ability to solve problems and make things happen. But to accomplish anything, we usually need a plan. So all goals need a plan. So for example, a spiritual goal, like spending time with God more regularly, a mental goal, like learning something new, a physical goal, like trying a new activity or getting stronger or faster, or a relational goal, like being a better friend or being kinder to your family. These are all good goals, but without a plan, they're just wishful thinking. This week, our big idea is that we are designed for God-sized goals. What is cool is that God designed us as a part of His plan to advance His kingdom on earth. And if you want to dive deep into that, you can check out week 2 of Next Step. But last week we started talking about Nehemiah in the book Nehemiah. Let's do a little recap before we jump in to see how God used Nehemiah as a part of His greater plan and goals for Jerusalem. About 140 years before this book was written, the Jewish people were conquered by an enemy army. They destroyed the city of Jerusalem, burned the temple where the Jewish people worship God, and sent many of God's people into exile. But God promised that one day the Jewish people would return. When the book of Nehemiah begins, some of God's people had begun returning to Jerusalem looking for ways to rebuild what they had lost. But it was a long process. Nehemiah was passionate about seeing Jerusalem restored, but he saw a problem. Although some of God's people were living in Jerusalem, the city walls were in shambles. Inspired by his love for his people and his God, Nehemiah set a God-sized goal: rebuild the walls of Jerusalem so God's people would be protected and God would be honored. Nehemiah had a God-sized goal. But what about a plan? If you remember from the Bible reading from last week, the first thing Nehemiah did was spend time in prayer. He fasted and he prayed for months. And in Nehemiah 1:4, it says, "For some days I mourned and fasted and prayed before the God of heaven." And then at the end of this prayer, in verse 11, Nehemiah prayed, "Lord, let your ear be attentive to the prayer of this your servant and to the prayer of your servants who delight in revering your name. Give your servant success today by granting him favor in the presence of this man. I was a cupbearer to the king." There are some things that I notice in these verses. Nehemiah didn't ask God for step-by-step instructions. He knew God wanted him to lead the charge to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, and that was enough. He started praying and fasting to align his heart with God's. Then Nehemiah started planning because God had given him the heart for this task. Also in this verse, it says, "I was a cupbearer to the king," and Sam talked a little bit about this last week. And originally, if you're kind of reading through this quickly, you might think, why is this important to know? Sam last week mentioned it was a very important job and that he had to be trusted by the king. But this is also helpful information for us to know because it serves another purpose. A cupbearer to the king, he had access and influence with the most powerful person in the kingdom. So think of how God had specifically placed Nehemiah for this specific purpose. So let's continue in Nehemiah 2:1-9, where Nehemiah is getting an audience with the king. So in the month of Nisan, the 12th year of King Artaxerxes, when wine was brought for him, I took the wine, is Nehemiah, I took the wine and gave it to the king. I had not been sad in his presence before, so the king asked me, "Why does your face look so sad, and when you are not ill? This can be nothing but sadness of heart." I was very much afraid, but I said to the king, "May the king live forever. Why should my face not look sad when the city where my ancestors are buried lies in ruins and its gates have been destroyed by fire?" The king said to me, "What is it you want?" Then I prayed to the God of heaven, and I answered the king, "If it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor in his sight, let him send me into the city in Judah where my ancestors are buried so I can rebuild it." Then the king, with the queen sitting beside him, asked him, "How long will your journey take, and when will you get back?" It pleased the king to send me, so I set a time. I also said to him, "If it pleases the king, may I have letters to the governors of Trans-Euphrates so that they will provide me safe conduct until I arrive in Judah. And may I have a letter to Asaph, keeper of the royal park, so he will give me a timber to make beams for the gates of the citadel, by the temple, and for the city wall, and for the residence I will occupy." And get this is good. "And because the gracious hand of my God was on me, the king granted my request. So I went to the governors of Trans-Euphrates and gave them the king's letter. The king had also sent my army officers and cavalry with me." So we read some of these verses last week, but I want to point out some more important things. In these verses, we discover Nehemiah hasn't just been praying and casually planning. He had been preparing in great detail. So before he went to the king, he was preparing in great detail. So when the king asked Nehemiah why he looked sad, he had an answer prepared. And then when the king asked what Nehemiah wanted, he had a request prepared. The king wanted to know how long Nehemiah's journey would take, and Nehemiah had a timeline prepared. And since the king seemed pretty open to his ideas, Nehemiah also had a list of requests prepared. Throughout this process, Nehemiah continued to talk to God in prayer. He used the strategic mind God had given him to plan and prepare while he waited for the right opportunity. Because Nehemiah had prepared in detail for this opportunity, he hoped he would get to speak with the king. And when God had arranged the perfect moment, Nehemiah was fully prepared to take advantage of it. God gave Nehemiah a huge task: to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. But God also gave Nehemiah everything he needed in order to make it happen. Nehemiah was made for this. Nehemiah had access to God through prayer. He had God-given talents, abilities, and passions. He had resources, opportunities, and connections God had given him, and he had other people. Although Nehemiah's God-sized goal probably scared and overwhelmed him sometimes, Nehemiah didn't give up or wait around for somebody else to handle it. Although Nehemiah's goal was extraordinary, he understood the tools he would need to accomplish that goal were ordinary, but they were already available to him. Nehemiah took the vision God had given him, the skills God had given him, and the resources God had given him, and he got to work. Nehemiah trusted that accomplishing this God-sized goal was exactly what he was made to do. And just like Nehemiah, you are designed for God-sized goals too. You have a brain that can strategize, people who can help you, and skills and resources you can use to see your goals accomplished. If you're not sure what you think about God right now, or you're not sure if you have any God-sized goals, that's really okay. What I'm going to share with you can still help you achieve whatever goals that you have. So if your goals right now are all about what you want to do or what you want to achieve for yourself, I do want to challenge you to think bigger than just you. While it's important to set goals for yourself personally, God designed you to do big things, even bigger than getting into college or making the soccer team, although those are really cool and great goals. Chase after your goals, but don't settle for goals that only benefit you. Like we talked about last week, try asking God what else you might be designed to do, because God has big plans for you, God-sized plans. If you think you might have a God-sized goal growing in your heart, that's great. Maybe you wrote something down last week and you've been thinking about it ever since. Either way, I see in Nehemiah's story things that can help us turn our God-sized goals into an action plan. God designed you just like God designed Nehemiah, with everything that you need to accomplish the goals God puts in your heart. You've got you. We all have days when we feel insecure about who we are or what we can do, but God designed you with care, intention, and purpose. When God gives you God-sized goals, ask, what do I bring to the table? How can I contribute? You also have others. Just like Nehemiah discovered most God-sized goals can't be achieved alone, there's a lot we can accomplish on our own, but if we want to make lasting change, we're going to need other people. When God gives you a God-sized goal, ask, who can I work with? God also gives us things. Nehemiah needed transportation. He needed wood, letters, and he needed the king's blessing. And you're probably going to need some things to help you accomplish your God-sized goals. When God gives you a God-sized goal, ask, what do I need and where can I get it? And also, you're gonna need God. Most importantly, you've got God. Whether your goal is an everyday, you-sized goal or a once-in-a-lifetime God-sized goal, God is with you just like God was with Nehemiah. Like Nehemiah, God probably isn't going to give you a step-by-step plan, although I know that's what we all want, for achieving these God-sized goals, but that's okay. You don't need one because you already have everything that you need. Like Nehemiah, you are designed for God-sized goals. You've got the bricks, now what are you gonna build? Manna students, we want to talk about this further in our small groups, through our small group discussions if we are in person. If you are watching online, the discussion questions are below so that you can use them for some personal thought or some discussion with your friends and family, however you want to do it. But we will continue this series, Goals, next week with week 3.